Good evening, my lovely Spocklelytes. Welcome to Spockle Academy. My name is Spockles, also known as Sebastian, and yeah, last weekend I did a small presentation for the group Pokeplay, which are my Belgian and Dutch friends. There was like an event going on locally, and for that I did a little presentation about team building 101. So I made that PowerPoint. I made I did some research and all that good stuff, and then just wanted to talk about it. And not to alienate my foreign friends, I decided to turn this into a little video. I did cut it short a little bit. I am gonna assume some things. I'm gonna assume that you know the terminology that I'll be using, like weaknesses, resistances, walls, and all that stuff. If you don't, just ask in the comment section and I will answer those questions. But in order to keep this video relatively short, the presentation was 1 hour and a half, and then I even had to cut it short. So that's why I'm gonna try to keep this relatively short. So what will we be discussing in this video? We're going to discuss the very basics of team building, meaning that it's going to be a team building based on typing. It's gonna be for the 6v6 singles format, as that is the format that I'm playing. I have no clue how to go about team building for a VGC setting, so if you are looking for that, I'm very sorry. I might suggest you other channels like Cybertron Productions or the official channel of Nugget Bridge or something like that. I'm very sorry. I play singles 6v6. So that's what I'll be discussing, and we're also not going to look at metagames and threat lists, meaning that this team might probably get totally swept by a Talonflame or something like that. I don't know. The example team that I'm going to build at the end of this video is just based on I need typings, I need some basic stuff in my team, and how do we go about this. So moving on, the first part that you need to know is actually just team building rule number 1. You need defensive synergy. Now what does that mean? Defensive synergy is actually just the fact that you don't carry 5 fire types on your team. You don't have more than 2 water types. You don't have more than 3. It's just you have only 6 Pokemon on your team. Make sure that you cover as many defensive types as possible. So yeah, it just means add as many resistances as you can. We're gonna go through a short we're gonna go through a table that will show all the defense, all the types, all the Pokemon types, and what they are weak to and what they resist defensively. I'm gonna show that in a bit. You need to avoid overlapping weaknesses. So it's okay if you play like I said, you can't play like 2 psychic types or 3 psychic types, but what you also can't do is play a psychic type and play 2 ghost types, because they share a weakness in dark typing. So that's something you need to avoid as well. And of course, keep the physical and special split in mind. When building a core, we often speak of physical walls and special walls, physical sweepers and special sweepers. Make sure that when you're defending, that you're able to take hits on both sides of the spectrum. You can play. You can play, for example, a Mismagius, you can play a Chansey or a Blissey, and you can play the, like, let's say Jellicent, for example, even though I just said that you can't have overlapping weaknesses. They all have a lot of special bulk, but not as much physical bulk, meaning that neutral physical attacks will do a shit ton of damage to your team. So try to avoid that and keep that split in mind as well. And then of course, when you are looking for defensive synergy, there are offensive types, attack types that are more common or more dangerous than others. The most common types that you'll encounter in competitive battling are fire, water, electric, ice, ground, rock, dragon, ghost, fairy, psychic, and fighting types. These will be very common types that you'll be facing, so make sure that you have those Definitely. Now there are also some types that are very common because the Pokemon that use them are very common. I know I said we're not going to look at Fretless, but some Pokemon are just always around. For example, Scizor is a bug type, so a stab bug attack coming from either either Mega Scizor or Choice Band Scizor. You gotta make sure that you're not too weak to that because they're very common. The same with Volcarona. If it can set up on your face because you're weak to bug and fire, then you're gonna have a big problem when you face these pretty common Pokemon. Flying type is also very important to try and counter a little bit because of Talonflame. That's just it. It's Gale Wing Talonflame. If you only have neutral hits or weak hits to flying, then you will get a problem. Dark type attacks are very common because of the attack knockoff. So make sure that you can do something that can deal with knockoffs. Usually if you have a physical wall, that's okay. If you have a mega evolution, that's fine as well because they don't get the item knocked off and stuff like that. And then finally there's the grass typing, for example Venusaur or Mega Venusaur. They're very threatening, they're rather common, but it's not only the attacking type like Giga Drain or Leaf Storm that are dangerous, it's mostly the Leech Seed and Spore. So maybe if you have like a grass type for yourself, you're pretty safe on that, but if you don't, make sure that you're not too weak to it. But then there are also types that are not so threatening and only need to be handled if you play certain types of Pokemon, or but usually these types are already inherently walled if you take if you add resistances to the first list, the most common attack types. These are normal, poison, and steel. Normal, yeah, you know, it's resisted. It's a lot of neutral damage. It's resisted by rock, by steel. Steel is a very common typing in a team because steel is very useful in general. Poison, is not even damaging steel type. Steel is not damaging steel type. So basically, if you have a defensive typing with steel in your team, this is already no problem. That's why I added it to the not so threatening list. So we're gonna go over the list of all typings. There are 18 typings, 18 types in total: normal, fire, water, grass, electric, ice, fight, poison, ground, flying, psychic, bug, rock, ghost, dragon, dark, steel, fairy. I feel like Mary Poppins singing these types, and each of them have a certain set of weaknesses, a certain set of resistances, and some even have one or two immunities. So basically, I'm not gonna discuss the entire list. I'm gonna discuss a little bit what, in my opinion, is the best defensive type. The best defensive type is obviously steel because it adds 11 resistances. It has 11 resistances, one of which is even an immunity, so the poison will not damage a steel type, and it only has 3 weaknesses. It's weak to fire, fight, and ground, which are rather common, but you can get another partner to deal with those type of attacks. But other than that, normal, grass, ice, flying, psychic, bug, rock, dragon, steel, and fairy, that's all good. You know, you can just switch them in, and that's a good thing. That's why steel is, as a monotype, as a singular type, is the best defensive type. Offensively not so much, but defensively definitely. The second best defensive type, just in that region, just like the single type, is fire. But fire has 6 resistances: fire, grass, ice, bug, steel, and fairy. Now fire, ice, fairy, bug, actually all of these types, you can come across them pretty often, so that's already a good thing. The thing that makes the fire type, not the solo fire type, for example a Camerupt is only fire, not so great, is that it has weaknesses in water, ground, and rock, and they're also fairly common. So that makes Camerupt not a very good wall. But for example Heatran, with the steel fire type, or the fire steel type, it adds a lot of resistances and a lot of even an immunity, and it only renders it fairly weak to water and very weak to ground. So you know, the combination of fire, you're always looking for a combination with fire. That's the second best defensive type, and basically all the other types are pretty balanced. There's one type that is so awful defensively, and that is Ice, because it adds only 1 resistance, and it's the typing itself. So a solo Ice type is actually very bad. It adds 4 very common weaknesses: Fire, Fight, Rock, and Steel. Like 3 of them are very common. Steel is not that common, except for the Bullet Punch, which is priority. And yeah, only 1 resistance. So that is basically the defensive chart. If you want to look at this more detailedly, just pause this video in a bit. And but basically that was the defensive synergy. That was rule number 1. Now, there are some useful abilities for this rule number 1. There are a couple of useful abilities that you can, that Pokemon have, that you can use to your advantage. Some abilities add a resistance to a certain Pokemon, meaning that certain type of attacks will do less damage. The most common one is Thick Fat, because it adds a fire and ice resistance, meaning that the damage will be cut in half. Most famous Pokemon for this is Mega Venusaur. At the moment, it has a fire and ice weakness, but because of the Thick Fat ability in its Mega form, it will actually lose that weakness, so it's only neutral damage. Another great user of this Thick Fat ability is Snorlax. Snorlax is a normal type, and normal types only have 1 weakness, which is fighting, but it also only has 1 resistance, actually an immunity, which is ghost typing. So adding Thick Fat to a normal type will mean that it's immune to ghost type, and it is resistant to fire and ice, which are 2 very useful resistances to have. The second one is Heat Proof, and there's only 1 Pokemon in the game. Actually 2. There are 2 Pokemon in the game, which is Bronzor and Bronzong, and Heat Proof actually does the same as Thick Fat, but only for fire. So it only adds a fire resistance. But its other ability, Levitate, is a lot more useful. I will explain that in a bit. And then finally there are 2 abilities called Filter or Solid Rock. And what they do is whenever your Pokemon takes super effective damage, it is reduced by 25%. And I see that the text is still in Dutch, so bij SE schade is actually just by super effective damage. Disregarding that, there are other abilities that add an immunity. Some are very useful, others are not so much useful because they're very specific. There are 3 abilities, Storm Drain, Water Absorb, and Dry Skin, that add a water immunity. And a water immunity, that's always nice, because that also means that you can't, for example, get a burn from Scald, which is a very common attack. Scald is a very common attack in competitive gameplay, because of the 30% burn chance. With Storm Drain, Water Absorb, or Dry Skin, you're completely immune to this. Added to that, it will gain you a special effect. Storm Drain, for example, will raise your special attack, Water Absorb will heal you, and Dry Skin will heal you as well. And I think Dry Skin also heals you when you're in the rain. So those are great abilities to add a water immunity. A second ability that adds an immunity is Sap Sipper. Not as common as the other, not as useful or not as common as the other abilities, but Sap Sipper is, yeah, it's pretty decent. There are certain Pokemon that can really benefit from it. A Bouffalant or a Miltank, it will add an extra grass immunity to the normal type Pokemon. Also, a Azumarill gets it, and Azumarill is actually weak to grass, so adding the immunity while using its secondary effect, which is to raise the attack by 1 stage, can come in handy. Of course, Azumarill is mostly famous for using the Huge Power ability, which will double its attack stat, or it will do double damage with physical attacks. But still, Sap Sipper makes it actually a pretty decent counter to Mega Charizard. Why? Because it resists the fire type attack, because it's a water type, and it's immune to the solar beam. Getting the attack boost, you can get off some decent damage against the Charizard. Why? So that is Sap Sipper. The next 3 abilities are called Volt Absorb, Lightning Rod, Motor Drive, and they add an electric immunity. And the same with Storm Drain, Water Absorb, Dry Skin, they add a secondary effect. With Volt Absorb, if the Pokemon that has a Volt Absorb is hit by an electric attack, it will gain HP. Yes, it will gain health. So it's actually a very decent healing move. So it adds the immunity, and I think the most famous user for that is the Jolteon. Then there's Lightning Rod, and Lightning Rod raises the special attack of the Pokemon that is hit by an electric type attack, and also in double battles it will lure all the electric attacks to that Pokemon. So it is a very useful ability, especially in doubles, but also in singles, because it will raise a special attack, meaning that you have an immunity and you can maybe set up a sweep. Finally, we have Motor Drive. There's only one Pokemon that uses it, and that's Electivire. And what no, that's not true. I think Emolga also has it. Basically, what Motor Drive does is that, first of all, you're immune to electric attacks, so that is great. Second of all, your speed will be raised by 1 stage. So getting hit by a lightning attack while you have the ability Motor Drive makes you faster, which is great. For example, the Electivire that I told you, it actually has decent offensive stats, but the thing that makes it so bad or not used that often is the fact that it's pretty slow. If you give it a Motor Drive boost though, if you can get it to get hit by an electric type attack, it will become a very threatening sweeper. So there's an immunity to ground type attacks, and that is called Levitate. So like I said before, Bronzor and Bronzong might they also have a secondary ability in Levitate, which is actually superior because it grants you a complete immunity to earth, to ground. So earthquakes, earth powers, whatever, doesn't matter. Some Pokemon really benefit from this ability, like Gengar, Rotom, and the Bronzong, of course. So other than that, it has no secondary effects. Flash Fire though gives you a fire immunity. So Pokemon like Arcanine, Chandelure, Heatran, they have this ability, and the secondary effect to that is that their fire type attacks will do more damage, which is always nice. You can switch into a Will-O-Wisp or a Flamethrower or whatever, and you get to boost your Pokemon. So that's nice. Then there are abilities that are still useful, but not as much as the above mentioned abilities, because they're very specific. The first one is Bulletproof, and the only Pokemon that learns Bulletproof are the Pokemon in the Chestnut line. So Chespin, the other one I can't remember the name, and Chestnut. And what this ability does is basically give you an immunity to any type of attack that has a sort of ball or a bomb in its name, or it looks like a ball or a bomb attack. Examples of that are Shadow Ball, Sludge Bomb, Focus Blast, Aura Sphere, I think. Basically, yeah, let's keep it at that. It's just everything that looks like a Hadouken attack. You know, if it goes Hadouken, you're probably immune to it. Then there's Damp, which is not as useful because it just stops self-destruct moves. There are 2 attacks, Explosion and Self-Destruct. It kills the user and then it does a shit ton of damage against the defending Pokemon. But if you have Damp, then it will fail. So yeah, it used to, maybe it had some use earlier on, but Self-Destruct and Explosion aren't used that much anymore. So basically not that important. Then there's Soundproof, which is actually pretty decent. If you fear like Roars, Bug Buzz, Hyper Voice, Boom Burst, if you have problems with those type attacks, Soundproof is the ability for you, because it protects basically the Pokemon with that ability from every attack that is sound based. So everything that makes a noise or that has anything to do with noise, that you can think of, Soundproof will stop that. Which Pokemon learns it? I think Exploud learns it. So he is the sound Pokemon. Voltorb has the ability, and there are some others that still have the soundproof. I think Mr. Mime has it as well. So yeah, but it's not, because it's so limited in its use. It's not so widely utilized. So but it's still sometimes useful. And then finally there's Wonder Guard, which is actually, it's an amazing ability. It's such a great ability, but the problem is that there's only one Pokemon that learns Wonder Guard, which is Shedinja, and Shedinja only has 1 HP. But what does Wonder Guard do? Wonder Guard negates all damage that is all direct damage, like direct attacks. that are not super effective. So on the Shedinja, which is a ghost slash bug type, if you want to do a water type attack, there's no way you will damage the Shedinja, because it's not super effective, so it's completely negated. And that's great. If this Pokemon would have been on anything other than Shedinja, it would have been totally broken. In Gen 4, a lot of people, when there was like a lot of genning and hacking and stuff, some people made they called it a Wonder Tomb. That was actually a Spirit Tomb with Wonder Guard, and basically that Pokemon could not get damaged because Dark Ghost at the time did not have any weaknesses. So adding Wonder Guard, which was completely illegal, made this Pokemon indestructible, because even status just could have been dealt with through rest. So yeah, it was stupid. It happened. Those people easily left my I easily dumped them from my friend list and stuff like that. So those are some useful abilities. Now, we're already 20 minutes in. The second rule of team building is coverage. What coverage means is that you need a range of attacks that can take care of multiple types. So we have 18 types to cover. Not all of them are really that important. But sometimes you need to know that there's a certain type that can hit multiple types, multiple Pokemon for super effective damage. And so the rule is that you need multiple types of attacks, especially those with good coverage. For example, Quake Edge is based on the combination of Earthquake and Stone Edge. That's why the name is Quake Edge. But it basically just means that you need one that you can use. You can have a Pokemon that has a ground type attack and a rock type attack, because ground has a lot of offensive coverage. I think it hits 5 or 6 types for super effective damage, which is great. But it has one type that is immune to it, which is flying, and Stone Edge is hitting those pretty hard. So having Quake Edge on a Pokemon is actually a very good coverage, because it will hit a lot of types for neutral damage at least. Then there's Bolt Beam, which is the name is derived from the combination of Thunderbolt and Ice Beam, which is just Ice Electric. So Ice can take, offensively can take down a lot of types, except for Waters, for example. Waters resist the Ice Beam, but then you can have Thunderbolt. So basically it's just the Ice and Electric on the same Pokemon. Other examples are maybe Thunder Punch and Ice Punch, or whatever. And then there's Fire, and Fire has a pretty decent coverage in general. There are a lot of types weak to it. There are also a lot of types that resist it, but basically if you can have some fire types, especially because Steel in general is a very good defensive typing, so if you add fire attacks, you at least have something to deal with Steel types. Other than that, coverage also means that you need to keep in mind that there's this physical special split. I told this already in the defensive part. I'm gonna say it again. Offensively, you can't just bring a team filled with physical sweepers. I've faced teams like that, and my Will-O-Wisp defensive Arcanine with Intimidate and Impish Nature will completely wall the shit out of you. The same goes, for example, with Weezing. It is a dedicated physical wall, so that one Pokemon can wall your entire team. The same goes for special attackers. If you only use special attackers and special attacks, then Chansey and Blissey will come in and laugh in your face. So you need to make a combination of the two sides. That doesn't mean on one Pokemon, but you'll need like a physical sweeper, for example Conkeldurr, and next to that a special sweeper like Hydreigon, for example, or there are many like Latios or something like that. And other than that, there is also a third type of attack that while not predominantly needed, it is still useful to have, and then those are support attacks. What does that mean? For example, Stealth Rock, Spikes, Entry Hazards in general, Status, Wish Passing, Boost Passing, Swords Dance with Baton Pass or something like that. It's always useful. So, looking at team building rule number 2, let's just see what kind of coverage we can get. So we have all the offensive move types right here. The normal Fire, Water, Electric, Grass, Ice, Fight, Poison, Ground, Flying, Psychic, Bug, Rock, Ghost, Dragon, Dark, Steel, and Fairy once more. And looking at that, we want to see what is the best type of attack. So we have fight and ground there that have 5 types on which it is super effective. So fight is super effective against normal, ice, rock, dark, and steel, and ground is super effective against fire, electric, poison, rock, steel. So like I said, ground is a pretty good offensive type. But on the other hand, fight, for example, is also resisted by 6 types, one of which is even immune to it. So that's always a bit iffy. Fight is resisted by poison, flying, psychic, bug, and fairy, and is immune to ghost, while ground also has a reasonable amount of it's only 3. It's only 3. Grass and bug are resist ground, but flying is completely immune to it. So although they have their advantages, they also have some disadvantages. But other than that, there are a lot of types. The rest of the types are pretty balanced. 4, 3, 2. Dragon is actually it has a lot of neutral damage, or it used to have at least. Out of the 18 types, Dragon has 1 super effective and 2 that are resisted. So basically, it still has 15 types that it does neutral damage to. Considering how powerful dragons are in general, that is actually not so bad. That's why it's used very often, and that's why steel types are also pretty popular. So those are basically the types. If you want to see the detailed chart, what they're super effective against, what they're resisted by, just pause this video for a bit and then continue on afterwards. Okay, so now that we have gotten all we've got the 2 rules. They're very basic because it's basic team building. It's team building 101. Let's kick it up a notch and discuss cores. What is a core? Well, a core is basically a group of Pokemon, usually 3 or 4 Pokemon, that when played together, they will reach a certain goal. So you can have offensive cores, from which the goal is usually just to break down the opposing team by doing a lot of damage while taking not that much damage in return. And there are defensive cores, which are meant to be able to tank basically any kind of hit that the opponent wants to throw at you. There are some famous cores that can do a lot of damage if you're not familiar with them. The first one is Volturn. Volturn is basically just a combination of Volt Switch and U-Turn. It's an offensive core meant to create momentum through switch advantage. Now, what does that mean? First of all, switch advantage is when your Pokemon that is on your side of the field has the type advantage on the Pokemon that is on the opponent's side of the field. So through that you create momentum, because you have the type advantage, your opponent will have to switch out the Pokemon that is in, which gives you 1 free turn, and that is your momentum. And the goal of an offensive core is to maintain that momentum while still doing damage and chipping away at your opponent's team until there's a point where you can get in your late game sweeper and just finish it off. This is a very annoying strategy to face, because basically U-turn can always be done. Volt Switch can be negated by ground types or types that have the useful abilities for the electric types. So there are ways to counter it, especially also the use of Stealth Rock and entry hazards that might reduce the amount of switching around. But if you allow them to switch freely all the time, you will take a lot of damage in the process. So that is very dangerous. The most famous duo to do it are Scizor and Rotom Wash, because basically Scizor has 1 weakness, which is fire, and Rotom Wash completely walls fire, so that's great. So Scizor can U-turn out and take the fire type attack that Rotom that was aimed at, and Rotom can take the fire type attack that was aimed at Scizor. On the other hand, Rotom Wash has only 1 weakness, and that is Grass type, and Scizor is 4 times resistant to Grass type, so it can easily switch in on those. And between them they can do a good amount of damage, because one is physical, one is special. Rotom also has Will-O-Wisp support and stuff like that, and it's very powerful. The second core that I want to discuss is called Skarmbliss. It used to be Skarmbliss, but now in the current metagame it is Skarmly plus Chansey. That's why I slashed it. So basically it's just the combination of Skarmory, which is a very powerful physical wall, and Blissey or Chansey, which and they are very powerful special walls. Chansey has one weakness, which is fighting, and Skarmory is steel flying, so it's neutral to the fighting and it can easily take those physical hits. Both members of that core also has a form of self-recovery. Skarmory has Roost, and Blissey or Chansey, they have Wish or Soft Boiled to heal themselves up. Blissey and Chansey also have the aromatherapy so that they can heal out of status. They even have no, not an aromatherapy. They have, I think it's aromatherapy or heal bell, but they can clear status on your team, and they can switch out with natural cure to heal themselves of status. Wish is also a very nice move on Blissey because it can be passed on to another member of your team. Skarmory, on the other hand, can lay spikes or can lay stealth rocks, which is very nice if you keep switching around. Every time your opponent switches, they will take some damage. So that is why this is a very powerful core. They add a lot of opportunity to set up for the rest of your team. And then there's a third core, which is actually new to Gen 6, and I just wanted to discuss that. I call it D for Defiant. I don't know if there's an official name for it, but basically I call it D for Defiant because it's the main users of the core is a combination of Deoxys Defense, Aegislash, and Bisharp. Basically what this core does is Deoxys Defense sets up the hazards Stealth Rock and Spikes, and then there are two attacks in the game that can remove those Stealth Rocks and Spikes, one of which is Rapid Spin and the other one is Defog. Now Defog, that's why it's only from Gen 6. Defog had this change in its attack so that it removes entry hazards and stuff like that, but it also lowers the evasion. Now that is where Bisharp comes in. Bisharp has the ability called Defiant. So if one of his stats goes down, then his attack will be raised sharply. Meaning Defog lowers the evasion, so Bisharp will get a +2. It will actually get a free Swords Dance. So that is actually very threatening, because it has Sucker Punch priority. Then there's Aegislash, and why Aegislash? Because Rapid Spin is a secondary move that removes entry hazards, and basically it's a normal type attack, so because Aegislash is a ghost type, it will not go off, so your entry hazards are safe. So that is actually the core, the strategy of that core, and it's very powerful. Either your opponent has to deal with the entry hazards, the switching around all the time, or they have to deal with Aegislash or a +2 Bisharp. So yeah, it's a very powerful core. So now that we've discussed some cores, how do you build one? Well, there are 4 basic steps to it. Step 1 is very simple. Choose your first Pokemon. Which Pokemon do you want to play with? What do you want to do with that Pokemon? And define the strengths and weaknesses of that Pokemon. So I'm going to show you in an example just a bit what I mean by that. Step 2 is to pick a partner. So you decided the strengths and weaknesses of your first Pokemon. Now the second step is that you pick a partner that can deal with those weaknesses as much as possible. For example, with type synergy, the weakness of Pokemon 1 should become the resistance of Pokemon 2, and if possible vice versa. And the resisted hits of Pokemon 1, so offensively, if a Pokemon has a resisted hit, for example a fire type on a water type attack, then the second Pokemon should have an attack that is super effective on that Pokemon that resists the first hit. So meaning that if you have a fire type that is that does not very effective damage on a rock type or a water type, then you need a Pokemon with a grass type that does super effective damage on that Pokemon. So after you've picked your secondary partner, you will check off your list again. You will check off the weaknesses that have been covered by the secondary Pokemon. You will see if you still remain the strengths, and you will add the strengths of the second Pokemon you picked as well. But you'll also add the weaknesses of the second Pokemon that you've added. Then the next step, step 3, basically, yeah, step is Dutch for step. Deal with it. Step 3 is to close the core, because basically you can build a core of 6 Pokemon. It is possible, but basically a good core has a lot of coverage just within a set of 3 Pokemon. So the first step would be to close the core. So you have your checklist of strengths and weaknesses, and then you're just gonna see what do you still need and which Pokemon fits that build the best. I will show you in an example just a bit what I mean by that. Then the final step is how to complement the core, because even with those 3 Pokemon, with the core of 3 Pokemon, there will still be a lot of things that you need to deal with. Might be that you need some support like Stealth Rock or Screens or Wish or whatever. Might be that you need to deal with some threats. Or you can even create a secondary core with one of the members of the first core. Basically, there's a core between Ferrothorn and what's the ghost type? Jellicent. That is a good solid core, but you can also make a core between Ferrothorn and Heatran, or Ferrothorn and Arcanine that has Flash Fire, because it's a lure. But we'll get to that. So I'm gonna show you an example core that I've built just for this presentation. I've created a team, and step 1, of course, I chose Arcanine, my Akamaru, except this time it's not a defensive Arcanine. This time I chose to use a physical offensive Arcanine. So Arcanine with Choice Band, with the ability Flash Fire. I've added 8 HP to its health pool, so that it was able to switch into Stealth Rock more often, and other than that it is full attack, full speed, because it can't get burned, and that is actually a good thing. And even if they want to try to burn my Arcanine, Flash Fire would kick in and give me an attack boost. So as my attacking moves, I've chosen Flare Blitz, which is Stab Fire, Wild Charge to deal with water types, and Close Combat to deal with rock types. The final move I chose is Extreme Speed, because Choice Band Extreme Speed is very powerful late game, because Extreme Speed is a +2 priority attack, meaning that it will almost always go first, except for protects and fake outs and stuff. But on the right you can see that I've added the weaknesses of this Pokemon. First of all, the defensive, the Pokemon that have the typing Water Ground, which are Gastrodon, Quagsire, and Swampert, they will completely wall my set, especially when they're physically defensive, because Flare Blitz is resisted, Wild Charge is immune, in Close Combat and Extreme Speed without having the stab, it's not good to do on those Pokemon. It's nice if you can predict them to switch in and you can get some damage off with the Close Combat, but Quagsire and Gastrodon, for example, have recovery, so it won't really matter. Other than that, standard physical walls are pretty threatening, because yeah, you're a physical attacker. You are weak to Stealth Rock, because Arcanine is a fire type, meaning that if Stealth Rocks are up, you will take super effective damage off it. It will take 25% damage each time it switches into a Stealth Rock, so meaning that you can at most switch in 4 times into Stealth Rock. And that is not including the damage you will get from the attack. So you need something to take care of Stealth Rocks. And then his, other than the Water Ground, the Arcanine, your stab attack is resisted by Fire, Water, Rock, and Dragon. Now, Water can be dealt with Wild Charge if it's not a ground type. Rock can be dealt with by Close Combat. But Fire and Dragon are still neutral damage at the most. Other than that, his defensive weaknesses are Water, Ground, and Rock, so you'll need something that can take those attacks aimed at him. So in step 2, I chose my partner, which is Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn at leftovers with the ability Iron Barbs, which will damage the opposing Pokemon if they do a physical attack on this Ferrothorn. I gave it a specially defensive set because it's already very bulky on the physical side. And so yeah, with the sassy nature, I think it reduces speed and adds to special defense. And then I give it the set Stealth Rock, Thunder Wave or Toxic, Power Whip, and Spikes. I gave it Power Whip because it would help me with the Water Ground coverage. So Gastrodon, Quagsire, and Swampert are all hit very hard by water ground coverage, while in return they really can't do anything. The Ferrothorn also adds Stealth Rock and Spike support, which is always nice to have because it will make life a lot more easier for Arcanine to switch in and finish off with Choice Band Extreme Speed. Every time your opponent switches, it will take damage. And it resists the water and rock type attacks that are aimed at Arcanine, so that is great. It also adds status with either Thunder Wave or Toxic, depending on how we close up the team. We might need some Thunder Wave support to reduce the opponent's speed, or maybe Toxic support in case we want to, we have problems with walls. Offensively, we still don't have, so this is the checklist on the right there, on the bottom screen, is basically what we don't have right now, what are still our weaknesses. At the moment we still don't have offensive coverage for fire types and dragon types. I don't have a physical wall, meaning that physical attacks will do a decent chunk of damage to my team. I don't have stealth rock removal just yet, and aside from the ground weakness that I still have, which Ferrothorn can't really handle because it's neutral, I added a fight resist, so we need something to take care of that. So looking at that checklist, I chose my third partner, which does a lot, which checks, so to close the core, it checks off a lot on the list. First of all, so this is Starmie with a Life Orb, and the ability can either be Analytic or Natural Cure. It doesn't really matter. Natural Cure, it allows you to absorb status, while Analytic might give you the opportunity to do a lot more damage to something that outspeeds you, if you of course live a hit. Other than that, it's just Timid Natured for maximum speed, 252 special attack, 252 speed for maximum damage and speed. And then I gave it Ice Beam, which is the dragon coverage. I gave it Hydro Pump, which is the fire coverage. And then I would just add Psyshock, because it is a special attacker, so Chanseys and Blissies are real, and Psyshock will attack them on their physical side, which is always nice. And then it adds Rapid Spin, which is entry hazard removal. Other than that, Starmie is a psychic type, so it resists the fighting type attacks aimed at Ferrothorn. So that is how we close the core, but it is of course not perfect. So we still have the ground weakness. Our team is rather fragile. We only have the special wall in Ferrothorn, so I don't have the physical wall, and we need a little bit more offensive pressure in order to get our team to set up as they want. So basically the next step, so to complement, I have chosen these three Pokemon. One is Uxie, Conkeldurr, and Togekiss. So Uxie is created as a physical wall with the Light Clay and the Light Screen and the Reflect. So that basically takes care of one, the ground weakness that I had because it has the ability to levitate, the fighting weakness that Ferrothorn has because it's a psychic type, and the fragility of the team has been taken care of because we add Light Screen and Reflect. Other than that, I've added Stealth Rock to it, basically meaning that my Ferrothorn set will now be adapted so that I will lose Stealth Rock on Ferrothorn, and it will add me an extra slot for another attack. And I chose Leech Seed on Ferrothorn because Leech Seed is very nice to force switches, which is great because we have Stealth Rock and Spike support. So that's why I put Stealth Rock on Uxie, and then finally I put in U-Turn on Uxie because it's fully defensive, it won't be outspeeding a lot of stuff. With U-Turn, that basically means I can take a hit and then U-Turn out, and the Pokemon that I switch into my opponent will actually have a free switch in. So that is great, in my opinion. That's what I wanted to test. Then we have Conkeldurr with the Assault Vest, because with the Assault Vest, Conkeldurr becomes a very bulky sweeper, especially on the special side with the Assault Vest. I gave it the ability Guts, so it will be able to switch into Toxic, Thunder Wave, and the Will-O-Wisp, or get the Burn, get Poisoned, or Paralyzed. That will boost its attack stat. No, that will not boost its attack stat, but its physical attacks will do 1.5 the regular damage. So if it would have been 100 damage, it would be 150. And yeah, it gets Drain Punch, Knock Off, Ice Punch, and Mach Punch, because Drain Punch is, of course, its stab healing move. Knock Off is great utility to knock off the items. Ice Punch is there to take on the flying types that wants to switch in, and Mach Punch is good priority. So it's a good Pokemon, it's a good solid addition to any team, and it adds a lot to mine. And then finally, there is Togekiss, because Togekiss adds an extra resistance to fighting and an immunity to ground, which is always great. But also, I made this a bulky special attacker, because I needed something that behind screens and with all that setup, maybe we can use something that can set up. So I gave it Wish, Nasty Plot, Air Slash, and Dazzling Gleam. So Wish can be used to heal up Ferrothorn and Uxie, and even Conkeldurr and Arcanine and Starmie. It's good team support. Nasty Plot to get its special attack stat doubled, and then Air Slash and Dazzling Gleam just for coverage. And that is basically the team. And in final evaluation, there is the end result for my defensive core. I have 14 resistances covered by these 3 Pokemon alone. That is already very nice. 14 of 18 resistances is a very nice percentage to have. The most important resistances are, of course, Rock, Dark, Fight, Ground, Psychic, Water, Electric, Dragon, Steel, and Fairy. They're all very, very common, so that's great. We have support in the form of Screen, Stealth Rock Spikes, Thunder Wave, Knockoff, and Leech Seed. That is awesome. And then the possible changes that I might do on this in this score is that I would replace one of the screens, probably Light Screen, because I have Ferrothorn and Assault Vest Conkeldurr, in favor of Toxic to deal with walls. Another possible change, but that is not really certain, is to add Protect on Ferrothorn instead of the Leech Seed, just to scout out some moves so I can decide on where to switch in. Then the end result, offensively, we hit 15 types for super effective damage. 15 of 18 types are hit for super effective damage, which is nice. That's always great to have, and that is a good offensive core. Other than that, we still have like the grass type to add the grass type coverage, so that's actually 16 with the ground, which is not dealt with now, but yeah, you know. And then in my offensive core, we added Rapid Spin, Knock Off, and Wish, which is awesome. And possible changes that I might do to this with this core is that I would give Arcanine a Life Orb instead of Choice Band, and then add like Will-O-Wisp or Morning Sun to give it even more usefulness if Will-O-Wisp is needed. I like Will-O-Wisp as an attack. I usually have at least one Pokemon on my team that has Will-O-Wisp or Scald just for the burns. Other than that, I might play Rock Slide on Conkeldurr if I face, for example, a lot of Talonflames, and Talonflame decides to switch in on my Conkeldurr regularly. Then I will just put Rock Slide on it to kill the Talonflame that switches in. And finally, Starmie, while decent with while it was part of the first version of the core, I might replace it with Mega Blastoise, because I don't really need the fighting type resist on Starmie anymore, because I have Togekiss and Uxie, and Mega Blastoise is just a lot more bulkier. It has a lot of special attack. It can deal with spin blockers like the Ghost types, because it learns Dark Pulse, and the Mega Launcher ability makes it hit really hard. So those are possible changes. The Mega Blastoise is probably going to make the cut instead of Starmie. So that was my presentation. I really hope you guys liked it. I really hope you found it useful. If you did, make sure to leave a like and leave a comment. Post your ideas of a core in the comment section below, and we can discuss them together. Maybe I will even try some of your ideas on a Pokemon Showdown session, and then we can discuss them or see how we can improve on it. So thank you guys for watching, and until next time, my name is Spockles. Peace out.